Purple Warriors podcast. I'm your host, Ali Sugars, and thank you for joining us. This podcast is about raising awareness for domestic and family abuse by allowing survivors to share their own journeys to recovery. You will find practical yet powerful information and tools that you can immediately implement into your own journey to recovery. You will also hear information on how you can help someone you suspect may be in a toxic relationship. To support this podcast and get access to amazing bonus content, click Become a Patron for more information. If you have a story to share, reach out to me, Ali F. Sugars, on Facebook, YouTube and Instagram. Hosts and guests will often discuss sensitive topics in detail. While this is done with the utmost respect and dignity, this may cause triggers for some listeners. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Purple Warriors podcast today. Our amazing guest for this episode is Alison Felton. So welcome, Alison. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Not a problem. Great name, by the way.
Yes.
So Alison is a nutritional medicine practitioner and a pH 360 personalised health coach. Now, did I get that right, Alison?
You did. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it?
That's okay. That's great. So in that, tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do, and why you have a passion for helping people in the area of health.
Sure. Well, it's been quite a long journey because when I started, my working life, I was involved in the fitness industry and the beauty industry as well, because I was, really fascinated with the body and biology and, getting people to perform at their best. So I did a lot of the aerobics and step classes back in the 90s when that was all the rage, and taught gymnastics as well. I then I got married and had 3 children and took a little bit of a break from working and homeschooled for 12 years. So that was quite a different journey from the normal working pathway.
Yes.
But it was, I guess a lot of the time in our lives when we have children, it makes us look at things from a different perspective. And I got even more interested in health and the body and how to maximize our health. So I did a lot of reading and self-learning whilst I was homeschooling the children, just to keep my own brain active and stimulated. And then I think I was telling you this one time before, because I remember it so vividly. 2008, the October long weekend, my husband had taken the children away so I could have a little bit of space, a little bit of time to myself. So I had the 3 days at home, and I was in the bathroom pondering that saying, "We are what we eat." And it was like the penny dropped. It was like an awakening. I just all of a sudden understood that not only what we eat, but how we treat our bodies and what we do with ourselves actually has an impact on our health. And it created a lot of anxiety in me because it was the year that I turned 40 as well. So I think at the time I didn't think of it was significant, but looking back, my grandmother died that year, I turned 40 that year, and then I had this moment of really thinking about health and what I've done in my life and how that was going to impact me in the future years. So created a huge amount of anxiety. And I spent the whole weekend on the computer researching about health, nutrition. I got onto all these raw food sites. I read all of these stories about people who had been given either a terminal illness diagnosis or a condition that they have to live with, and the medical establishment had kind of said, "Look, there's nothing we can do. You just have to live with it." And they made some quite what a lot of people say radical, but they were just big changes in their life around how they ate and their lifestyle and stress management and actually reversed these conditions. So I got really fascinated about that, particularly because not everybody did it the same way. I mean, there was obvious things they took out, they stopped eating any junk food and started moving more, but it wasn't the same for everybody. So that then led me to the path of doing a bachelor in health science in nutritional medicine, because I wanted to understand how food could be used as medicine to help the body heal. And when I finished that, I became more and more aware of the fact that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to health. You know, we're all individual, unique beings. We all have slightly different biology and different body types. And even though there's a lot of fabulous diets out there, we often have phases of diets where everyone should be doing a paleo for a while, a keto, or we should be vegan, vegetarian's best. Now, all of those diets are valid, but they don't work for everybody. So somebody does really well on a vegan diet, other people don't thrive on that at all because it doesn't suit their biology. So this then led me into looking into gene testing and looking at people's genetic variations and how those variations interact with our diet and our lifestyle choices, and whether that has a positive or negative impact on our biology. And then that further then take me to the PH360 training, which actually takes that to an even deeper level, looking at how we developed as an embryo, epigenetics, and a whole lot of science behind it. So it's just amazing stuff. I love it.
Yeah, I can tell that. Wow, you've clearly gone in depth too, and I have to agree when you've said that there are a lot of really good diets out there, or eating plans, as I like to refer to them as.
Yeah, exactly.
For me personally, I mean, I know that I've tried the keto diet, and it helped. It did. Yep. And also my daughter is actually a vegetarian. She keeps saying, Mum, you need to go vegetarian. I'm like, no, I like my meat too much.
It's really common, and I don't know, it's just a female thing, but it's really common for both my daughters went through a phase of being vegetarian for a couple of years, and a lot of that was based around the animal compassion, and they were okay with sort of the eggs and the milk and those sorts of things, but actually eating the meat. But they came through that and changed again. So there's lots of different options for people. And like you said, the keto diet, you found that you did get positive results for that, which you will, but you could have a friend that's doing exactly the same diet and not getting the result, and they don't work out. They think there's something wrong with them, or they're not doing it properly. It's just that it actually doesn't suit their biology. So
Yes, and also, again, referring back to my daughter, I hear what you're saying. I think it would be interesting for her to maybe speak to you, because she has actually become, she doesn't call herself a vegetarian, she calls herself a flexitarian, which I think is interesting. Because she finds that certain foods she eats just don't agree with her, although she likes them,
Yes.
So, yeah.
And a lot of people do find that too. And often when you're looking at health as well, if people need a little bit of healing work going on, or their body needs a break, sometimes you actually have to take out healthy foods for that process to allow to happen. And then those foods can be brought back in. So it can be very confusing when you say to a client, oh, I don't want you eating tomatoes or capsicum and those sorts of things. And they think, well, hang on, aren't they healthy foods? It's just that if their gut's not working well, or there's something that's not quite right, sometimes those foods can irritate the system, and they just need to be removed until the healing's done and everything's functioning well, and then they can be brought back in. So
that's an interesting thing that you just said then. So we can take foods out and then gradually bring them back in.
Definitely. And a lot of that too comes, a lot of people find they might have what we call food intolerance. So they're not allergic to it, but they just feel that it might not, that might not sit well in their stomach, or they might find that they get a skin reaction or something when they eat certain foods. And that's often because their gut is compromised. It might have permeability or just not be functioning well. And those foods can pass through the gut layer, let's just say the lining is the word I was looking for, the gut lining, and they haven't been broken down small enough, so you might get an immune response to that, and then that can then cause a response in the body that comes out as a eczema or rash, or discomfort in the gut, or different headache even, and those sorts of things.
And out of curiosity, what about changes in age? So does our gut health change with our age?
Well, I mean, gut health can change with age, simply because, as we know, when we're younger, we get away with a lot of stuff and it doesn't really impact us, but it's that long term, and you might find that you feel like you woke up one day with, oh, all of a sudden your gut's not working well. That's actually taken a long time for that to get there. And that's the whole long thing with chronic illnesses. Chronic illnesses don't happen overnight. They can often take a decade to develop, or even longer. So that's why often trying to allow the body to heal itself can be a long road, because it hasn't taken a week to develop. It's not going to turn around in a week or two either. So, but to answer that question even a bit deeper, as we age, the needs of our bodies are different. And this is where something like the keto diet or a low carbohydrate diet often does suit postmenopausal women, because they don't need as much carb anymore. But for a young fertile woman to go too low in carbohydrates can be quite impacting on their menstrual cycle and fertility. So they need to be mindful of not going too low. It kind of even mimics that. If anybody knows that, marathon runners, female marathon runners that train a lot and run a lot, and they lose a lot of body weight, often they lose their menstrual cycle, because the body is and the brain is saying that it's going into starvation because there's not enough carbohydrate around, or there's not enough size on the body. So now's not a good time to be getting pregnant and having a baby. We wait till the feast comes. So that's just kind of an evolutionary response that we have. So if you reduce those carbs too low, it will signify to the body that it could be a famine. And let's just shut down the menstrual cycle for a while until we go into the feast and it's safer to bring a baby into the world.
That's fascinating. And I'm actually really enjoying this, because we speak a lot about mental health on this podcast a lot, and we don't often speak about the physical aspects of health.
Yes.
So I'm really, I'm enjoying actually hearing about what you're saying. So I know you've said that you do something called nutrigenomic DNA profiling. Did I get that right too?
Yeah, big word.
Yeah, good. Tell us about that.
So the nutrigenomic DNA profiling is looking at a person's genetic variations. So we all have these variations, and I'm not talking about the ones that give somebody blue eyes and somebody brown eyes, or that might result in a disease outcome. They're just tiny little variations that might affect how a gene makes a protein. So I try not to get too sciencey, but our genes are little blueprints to make proteins in our body, and proteins can be hormones or enzymes or receptors. And so if they're not actually being made properly, they may not function to their full capacity. So what we do is we look at genes in certain areas. They're kind of grouped into the areas that affect inflammation in the body, or oxidative stress, or the detoxification pathways, fat metabolism, and those sorts of things. And that can give us an indication whether a person needs particular support in that area. And through food and lifestyle choices, we actually have the ability to turn genes on and off. So our environment actually impacts the expression of our genes. And there's a little bit of a saying that says, the genes load the gun, the environment pulls the trigger. So we're not actually destined to just what our genetic makeup is. It depends on whether we allow our environment, and our environment is food, thought, exercise, everything, social situations, whether we allow them to work positively for us and switch on the beneficial genes, or whether it works negatively and perhaps switches on genes that aren't working so well. So it's about tweaking people's dietary choices, and can also prioritize what sort of supplements might be more beneficial for a person from that genetic perspective.
And when you say the word genetic too, it also brings up a question to mind. What about family members? So, genes that may have been passed down through a family. Does that come into it at all?
So basically, that's how it works. So when you're made, when you're conceived, you get genes, one gene from mum and one gene from dad that makes the pair. So that's another aspect of looking at the gene variation, is you might get a variation from your mum, but you may get what they call the normal or the wild type, because it's based on a normal healthy population. So so dads might be the normal type, which means that you only have, half of that gene is affected. But if you get a variation from both mum and dad, that's going to impact the production of that protein much more than if you just get the one. So we're really looking for the one where you get a variation from both mum and dad, because that's going to have the most impact. So definitely.
Wow, so you really go deep into it, don't you?
It's very deep, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So as we said before, so we do speak a lot about mental health on there, but tell us the correlation, just talk us through the correlation between mental and physical health or gut health.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I think one of the first things to really get our head around is that often in science and medicine and that we look at the body as different systems, but it's actually a whole organism. So these things aren't separate. So our gut and our brain actually communicate both ways through something called the vagus nerve. So, for example, if you're experiencing a lot of anxiety and that sort of thing, we know that we can actually feel that in our gut. It can cause sort of irritable bowel type syndromes. You might need to go to the toilet, that sort of thing. And it also goes the other way if our gut, how most people have experienced that. So it's always a good analogy. And sort of the other thing with the gut is that it's really important to understand that our gut doesn't just digest our food. It has so many other functions. So our immune system, our immunity is mostly in our gut. And so it has a lot to do with the inflammation in our body, which also correlates to inflammation in the brain. So inflammation in the brain is also going to cause mental health issues, and it can cause depression and those sorts of things as well. Our neurotransmitters are made in our gut and then sent to the brain. So two really important ones, serotonin, which is our happiness kind of hormone. And that's the one that if people are suffering from depression or anxiety, maybe you put on medication that helps to keep serotonin in the brain longer.
Yep.
And GABA is another one, and that's a calming hormone. So if the gut's not functioning well and isn't producing these neurotransmitters well, then obviously that's going to have quite an impact on our mental health. And this also comes down to the microbiome in the gut, which is the bacteria that live in our gut, and they send a lot of chemicals and do a lot of immune work, and they're really, really important to have that balance correct. And that's where we sort of bring in other areas of lifestyle, because obviously the food we eat feeds that bacteria. And if we eat good food, we get the beneficial bacteria. If we eat a lot of junk food, then we're feeding up the not so helpful bacteria. Exercise, it affects our microbiome. It increases the diversity of our microbiome. It also releases endorphins, which is good for mental health. So it's really important just to see that everything is connected, and the gut and the brain are chatting all the time. So huge connection.
The gut and the brain are chatting. I like that.
Yeah, they're chatting all the time. One's talking to the other, and vice versa. So, mental health isn't just thinking about your brain. And I mean, obviously, stress management is a huge thing as well, because stress causes issues with our gut, which causes issue with the microbiome. And then you have that feedback loop that then the brain's not getting the hormones, the neurotransmitters that it needs. And it's sort of like this constant feedback where everything's out of whack. So we need to be looking at all areas of life, how well you're eating, how well you're dealing with stress management, how you're moving, what your social relationships are like, what your environment's like. Everything impacts.
I'm actually going to totally back you up there, because as I mentioned before, in the last couple of days, given what we're going through, the world situation with COVID-19 and everything, I have actually been experiencing myself a bit of anxiety, which I think is quite natural for a lot of people right now.
Absolutely.
And the things I noticed in my own body were that, yes, I had the stomach ache. I didn't actually feel like eating food. I had a migraine that lasted for a day and a half, nearly 2 days. But what I found was because I wasn't, I had the sick feeling and I wasn't eating well, and I wasn't moving. It wasn't getting better. It was actually getting worse. But once I made that, conscious decision to kind of force myself to go and have some healthy food, I forced myself to get up and move and go for a walk. it kind of all started to, I feel a bit better
balance
now.
out.
You know, balance out, as you say, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really important point too for people to understand, that we're in those modes of sort of anxiety and stress, and that it actually puts us into what's called the sympathetic nervous system. So that's our fight, flight, freeze. So, you know, evolutionary, that was meant to be like, you know, you're either going to stand and fight or you're going to run. And so what that does is it gears the body to be able to get the oxygen, get the blood pumping, get the adrenaline going, to be able to do that. So it shuts down digestion and it shuts down all the rest, because you don't need to digest when you're running and trying to get away from something. So then the digestion shuts down. And also carbohydrates are important in the manufacture of serotonin. So often when we're feeling that low mood, we tend to want to go for a carby type food, which tends to be the not, you know, the junky food, in, you know, because we have that available. To try and lift the mood, you know, and try and get, you know, sugar to try and lift the mood, but then you just have that drop again. So it is really interesting when you understand the science and the biology behind what is happening. And so sometimes simply, this is why some things that, you know, you say to people, you know, to stop and breathe, and everyone's like, that's too simple, you know, it's too easy. But what happens is when you stop and you deep breathe and you have the intent to sit and take 10 really deep breaths, it actually switches you out of the sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the one that digests and rests and calms you down. So just taking the time to do that can actually be really beneficial to try and switch that sympathetic nervous system off. And, you know, so our thoughts do often feed that too. And as you said, the situation that we're in at the moment, it's quite an easy place to be, in that anxiety and the uncertainty of what's going on. So that's to be expected.
Yeah. So, and you're providing some, you know, great help. And like you say, it can be, you can give yourself some help, which is as simple as stopping and doing some quick breathing exercises.
Absolutely.
And it does. And I'll back you up there. I'll say that absolutely does work.
Yep. Can I add one other little thing on there too, that if anybody that does suffer from anxiety quite a lot and gets like sort of the panicky feeling and panic attack, breathing through a straw is brilliant at switching that off. So big breath in, and then because you're breathing through the straw, it has to be quite slow and pushing it through, and that brings you right down and can switch off that panic feeling. So that's another little tip, that I have friends that carry a little straw in their handbag just in case they get put in a situation that they're a bit uncomfortable. You just nick to the bathroom and
that's
have a
really
little breathe.
good idea.
Yeah.
And this might seem a silly question, but is that kind of like akin to, you know, breathing into a paper bag? Like,
yeah, I guess so. So I've actually never quite understood the paper bag, because I'm thinking you must be breathing in carbon dioxide again and that sort of thing. So yeah, but yes, it's the same kind of concept of, you know, that's slowing the breathing down. Because when you get panicky and the heart rate goes up, your breathing goes up, and it's hard to break that cycle. So, you know, breathing through a straw or deep breathing, if you don't have one, can help switch that off and just sort of calm everything down. Yeah.
That's brilliant. I would never have thought of that. I think I'm going to go get a straw and I'm going to put it in my handbag after this.
Yeah. It can be, and you can buy those stainless steel and bamboo straws now too, so you can actually have quite a sturdy one in your handbag, so it doesn't get all mushed up and bent and that sort of thing. So, and better for the environment. So there you go.
There you go. See, there's help there for everybody.
Yeah, that's it.
Now, Alison, tell us a little bit more about the pH 360 Health.
Yes, so pH 360 is a personalised health platform. It is incredible. It takes the gene testing and what I've been talking about sort of to the next level. So if I give you a little bit of the science behind it, because there's decades of research behind it, so there's so much information. But what it's based on is when we develop as an embryo. So an embryo has 3 layers of tissue in it. There's the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. So if you just think of ecto, meso, and endo, we are dominant either 1 or 2 of those layers as we develop, and that then develops our body type. So somebody with the ecto, they'd be called an ectomorph. That tissue layer then becomes the skin and nervous system. Right. So the meso layer is more about muscle, bone, heart, and adrenal glands, and then the endo is more muscle, fat, and digestive system. So that gives us areas that are, you know, people sort of have strengths and vulnerabilities in as well. So a pure ectomorph might be like the typical ballerina type physique, you know, very petite, fine bone, don't put on weight, don't build big muscle. Meso is a more of a shorter, athletic-y, lean muscle type person. And then the endomorph is somebody that conserves energy better. So they are going to be a bigger structure and find it easier to carry weight. And then you have combinations of the two. So it gives us 6 health or body types. So from that as a basis, it then does look at epigenetics, your ethnicity. When you actually do the program, you take so many measurements of your body, like you literally measure everything in your body and then answer a whole lot of questionnaires. And there's lots of ratios in the body of your, you know, your finger length and your arm to your body length and those sorts of things. And then it asks you a lot about your own personal health history and those sorts of things. And from that, it then gives you your own personalised health program in 6 areas that cover food, fitness, your mind, so sort of the mindfulness and mindset, your environment, so what sort of environment that you flourish in the best, your social relationships, so what social engagement sort of energizes you and those that will drain you, and your what they call your genius, which is kind of like where your strengths are and your talents. So it's what gives you purpose, and it might make suggestions of the types of occupations that are best for you. Oh, wow. And of those 6 health types, they actually sit on a circle of 360 degrees, which is where you get the pH 360. And each of those health types is like a wedge on a pie chart, and they're 60 degrees each. So you and I might be the same health type, but sit at a different degree. Therefore, we're going to have differences in our prescribed health platform, because your mind might work differently than mine, even though we're a similar body type. Right. So if you like, I can share my screen and show you my platform and what it shows you. It's really, really comprehensive. So, and you can often go in and update your measurements and your health too, and anything that you change, it will recalibrate everything and change prescriptions for that. So with the food, I didn't mention, there was one thing about it that I really love, which is called chronobiology. So people are probably aware or heard of the term circadian rhythms, and people understand that we're meant to be awake during the day and asleep at night, and we have hormones that dictate, you know, when we're awake, when we feel energized, and when we get sleepy, and those sorts of things. But also each of our organs have their own little biological clock in them, and everybody is slightly different. So in the food and the fitness and mind area, it actually gives us a daily schedule of when it's best for us to eat, when it's best for us to be, when our mind is most active. You know how you've heard those sayings of, oh, she's really a night owl, or he's such an early bird. And people often think it's just a preference or that sort of thing. It's actually wired into our biology. So for some people, it's natural for them to go to bed a bit later and get up a bit later. And those people need to take the morning slow. So if there's too much stress in the morning for those people, it'll create stress in their body and inflammation. So they're not the people to get up at 5 o'clock and go to the gym for an hour and bash it out there, because they won't get results. And their time is better to exercise intensely in the afternoon. So, and it does that with food as well. So if I look at an overall, this will give me a daily schedule of when to avoid eating, when's the best time to drink. For me, I'm the body type that can actually skip breakfast or have a later breakfast and end up with only 2 meals a day. Another body type would need a really big breakfast, weaning down to a very small dinner. which we've sort of heard of that, you know, breakfast as a king, lunch as a prince, and dinner as a pauper. And then there's another body type that's very, very active, and they're the ones that need those small, regular meals, like 6 small meals a day, to keep fueling their body because they're on the go all the time. So we get daily schedules around the best time to eat. There are food lists that will show you which foods are excellent, which foods to avoid. When you go from excellent down to okay, the okay foods are still really good for you to eat, but excellent foods are saying as the most nutritional value for your body type, so you can eat them every day, whereas the okay foods you might only have a couple of times a week.
Right.
If I go into viewing the food, it'll give me a big rundown from the science behind why that food is recommended for me. Now, you could put in, as an example, when you do your questionnaire, you could say that you've got high cholesterol. That will base foods around trying to get your cholesterol levels down. Once they are down, you can go back in and change that and say your cholesterol levels are normal, and so the food will then change again, all according to what your body needs. It will give you recipes
Wow.
of, and you can even go through and choose what kind of course and the types of cuisine, if you want some Asian food or African food. You can put that into, well, it does it for you, but you can also add. So because I can go for 2 meals, if I have to get up early and have a small breakfast, I could add something in there. But and I must say, I am enjoying this isolation restriction time at the moment, because I don't have to get my son to the bus or to school in the morning. So I can actually sleep till 8 o'clock now, get up, take my time getting ready in the morning, have a later, breakfast/early lunch, and then I do all my work in the afternoon. And, it just suits me perfectly, because there's no societal pressure or, sort of schedule pressure to be somewhere to do something. So it's working really well for me. Being a night owl, that is. So for an early morning person, it probably doesn't affect us much. So the same for fitness. We can go through and it will tell you, a really important time for you to sleep. I should take my morning slow. I could maybe do some flexibility or walking in the morning, but intense exercise is better for me in the afternoon. Another thing that's brilliant for this time as well is there's actually exercises on here for you to do at home.
Oh, that's
so
brilliant.
People can't get out, and you can put in, so I could put in that say I wanted moderate intensity, I'm a beginner and I have no equipment at home, I can apply those filters and it's going to bring up all the exercises that fit in those categories. So it covers, and then you can break that down into strength, cardio, or flexibility. And then we have lifestyle that, once again, there's an overview of, this is sort of around the best time when you're, your mental activities. It tells me that I shouldn't nap in the afternoon. The interesting thing about this is it actually tells me things that I've already innately known but ignored because they don't fit with society's routine.
Right.
I've always known that if I have an afternoon nap, I always feel awful when I wake up. It's like I have to go through the whole waking up process again, and it's just not worth it. And so it's just really interesting. And the same thing with the night owl. I always felt like, because everybody else gets up in the morning and you don't, I still haven't slept any longer, but I always felt like, because you're the last one out of bed, you're a bit lazy and you've slept in and all that sort of thing. So it's actually really refreshing when you get this. It gives you permission to be yourself and to understand yourself and say, hey, it's okay, because that's how my biology is wired.
Yes.
It also puts all of the 6 areas. So all of the 6 areas are equally important, but it puts them into priority for the body type. So for me, my number 1 priority to have right is the place, my environment. So if I have the food and the fitness right, but my place is not conducive for me, that's going to create stress in me. So I'm still going to have that barrier of trying to maximize my health. And I'll give an example of a lady who fits in the endomorph category, which is the people that are larger, they find it easier to put on weight. they're actually designed to conserve energy. So they do really well in the feast-famine scenario. So when there's a feast, they conserve that energy. So when they hit a famine, they do really well, and they can care and nurture. Their thing is nurturing and caring and giving to others. But of course, in our environment, there is no famine. We live in a feast constantly. So that's very difficult. But anyway, there was a client who had, she was already doing really well with her food and her fitness. She was moving, she was exercising, she was eating really well, but she was really struggling to, shift the weight. And she was, she'd lost a little bit, but she just really couldn't sort of break through. But her number one priority is social, is the relationship, because of that nurturing, giving nature of that health type. They need to have that social, they need to have the family, the relationships, everything balanced and in order. And it wasn't. And when that was worked on and that got balanced, the weight started to slowly fall off, because her body was still being stressed by the social area in her life, and stress releases cortisol, and cortisol makes us hold on to weight, because her body says, cortisol, it's stress, it's a famine, conserve energy.
Right.
So it just shows that there's so many different areas of our life that can place stress on our body, and stress, gives us those hormones that for some people means to hold on to weight, because that's safety. So when those other areas are put into place, then sometimes that's when weight can drop off or healing can happen, whatever it is. So each health type has a different priority at the beginning of their 6 areas. And that's quite important. And so we can also, if we go into, I'll just give an example of mind, it might then go through, give you different scenarios of how your mind may work or how you might respond to a situation, and then give you tips of what you can do. So there's mindfulness, natural brain function, getting in the zone, those sorts of things. And it does that as well for place. So environments that maybe, so you're looking at your work environment, your home environment. Some people can do fine living in a city. Other people, that would just not be good for them. They need more open spaces. They need to see nature. So that might be fixed by just putting lots of plants in your house, if that's something, and have that greenery around. So there's ways around these things. If you can't sort of pick up and move to the country, it might be a case of, getting a big scene on the wall in front of you that's looking over a lake and a nature thing, and some plants around you, and giving you that sense of being in nature. Would be enough. So there's lots of little tips and things you can do. So it's an awesome program.
That is really, really in depth. That's amazing.
I know it is. It's and when they do the measurements, there's something like, when you do your program, there's something like 10,000 data points they use in the algorithm to come up with your health type. And the other area in the health type too, that's quite important to look at, is each health type has a dominant hormone or neurotransmitter. So with the endomorph, when I was talking about nurturing and that, they're dominated a lot by prolactin. So prolactin is the hormone that produces breast milk, that's sort of that bonding with the nurturing. That's what gives the mother the ability to do all the things they need to do for a baby and not expect anything in return, because of that connection. So, and then you've got other health types that might be dominated by dopamine or adrenaline or serotonin or oxytocin. They're the people that like connection. So they're dominated by that trust, connective type hormone. So it's just, it blows my mind. It's so fascinating.
And I just want to say there too, if anyone is listening to this podcast on Spotify or Google Play, or they're listening to the podcast, if you would like to see the video version, you can actually go and see Alison's screen share on YouTube and Podbean. So just putting that out there. But, I have to say, Alison, this absolutely fascinates me as someone who is so far from scientific. I've actually got no idea. The way you have explained this is actually very, very helpful. It is clearly a very in-depth program.
Yes.
And And I love the way it's got the things about how to keep your mind healthy in there as well. So it is definitely an all-inclusive program, isn't it?
Absolutely. It covers every area. And for myself, like anyone that did want to work with me, because I have the nutritional medicine background and the genetic variation and profiling background as well, there's many other skills that I can bring in. So it's great because people can be coached around all these areas, but then they have access to that platform where they can go at home and play around a bit and read it all. And you don't even have to understand the science behind it. But I think there are certain health types out there that need to understand the science, because, you know, there'll be the skeptical type that go, oh, prove it and show me how it works. So, and then there's others that will just take it at face value and say, just tell me what to do and I'll go do it. So yeah. So it is incredible. It's an amazing platform, and it's just got so much scope. So.
Fantastic, Alison. So if people would like to get in contact with you, how can they do that to find out?
Well, yep. So I have a Facebook page, which is Alison Felton Helix Nutrition, where anyone can message me through there. You can send me an email to helixnutrition@bigpond.com. I do have a website which is actually being revamped at the moment, so please in the future go and visit that, and that's helixnutrition.com.au. So any of those places, and I have a free PDF. If anybody would like to email me about that, I can send out a link, which is 7 steps to optimal health, and it gives you the 7 areas of health that are really important to understand, and just a few tips. So obviously it's not going to be personalised because it's a little bit more generic, but there's still those areas that are important to everybody. I do offer free 30-minute chats to anybody that wants to understand more about what I do. And I'm also offering anybody that connects with me through this podcast $100 off of a 3-consult package that I do. So awesome. If they just mention that they heard of me through Ali's podcast, The Purple Warriors, then I can give them that discount.
Beautiful. And as always, we will make sure that those links are available in the description below the podcast. And Alison, thank you so much. That has been extremely educational, and I have personally gotten a lot out of today.
Yep.
And I hope our listeners have too. So thank you.
I too. I loved it. I love talking about it, and thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I do, and I hope this has been helpful to your listeners.
I'm sure it has. Thank you very much.
Thank you.